It's time to share my journey into the world of healing, intuition, and spiritual discovery. As I find my place as a healer, psychic, and medium, I'm here to share my experiences and insights in hopes of breaking down barriers between different spiritual perspectives. Whether you're curious about energy work, looking to deepen your understanding, or just exploring your own path, this podcast offers stories, teachings, and connections to help you navigate the space between worlds. I'm Heather, and this is Soulful Wonderings. Are you coming along for the ride? So at the time that we're recording this episode, we are actually entering into the month of May. For me, May is a little bit of a weird month, I guess. Obviously, it's Mother's Day, which I think that falls right in line with our New Year, New Journey, little journey that we've been on. So I think this is a perfect time to talk about this. But it's also the month of my mom's birthday. And for me, like I said, it's just, it's a little difficult. I think it's hard to reconcile a lot of the emotions that I feel during the month of May. Obviously I want to celebrate being a mom myself, and I love that, and I love spending that time with my son, with my husband, and also with other people in my life that are moms. But I'm also dealing with sort of the absence of my mom and other moms that have been important to me. So, and of course, I'm kind of struggling with that whole, am I being a good mom? And for many years, I quantified that with, if I am 1/10 of the person that my mom was, I'll change the world. But then as the years went by, I've also been dealing with, let's call it the aftermath of things that I discovered after she died. And it's a slippery slope at times. So maybe we should start at the beginning, huh? My mom was basically my best friend. She was easily the strongest woman I'd ever known. And I would say for much of my life, it's safe to say that she was essentially my hero. That's just kind of how I looked at her. I mean, as far back as I can remember, my family always owned their own business. And there were a few different ones along the way, but basically I spent my entire life watching them run these businesses. And my mom somehow basically did everything. Okay. She helped run the business. She cooked, she cleaned, she raised us. She did it all, and she did it well. Y'all, I can remember when I went to college, some of my roommates, they would basically make fun of me because when I did my laundry, I did it the way my mom did. So for instance, the hangers matched my clothes at least as much as they could. So if it was a white shirt, it was on a white hanger. It was a blue shirt, it was on a blue hanger, and so on and so forth. Because that's what my mom did. And the truth is, I still do it at times when I'm the one doing laundry, I find myself doing that. But my mom, she kept a clean and put together house. Do you know what I mean? Our clothes were laundered for us. They were ironed, because y'all know how much cotton we had back then, especially. She ironed all of it and put it back in our closet on the same day. Okay, it was all done at one time. The towels were folded a certain way. They were folded perfectly. They were stacked all together in a certain way. The kitchen was neat as a pin. Everything in its place. She just had this somewhat uncanny ability to keep things neat and in order. OCD much, huh? Wonder where I got that side of me from. Yeah, I think we know. And we pretty much had a home cooked meal every night. But Sunday was the day, okay? We went to church, and then after that, we basically had a feast for lunch. Y'all, this woman could have fed an army with the amount of food that she cooked. And I'm aware that's somewhat a Southern thing, but evidently it was a my mom thing too. And she would plan it where we were eating almost right after we got home. I still don't know how she did that. How was that ready so quickly? And then, of course, my sister and I had an older sister, 4 years older. We were kind of the servers, I guess, because let me tell you something, we didn't eat out of pots on the stove, all right? Like I do. Nor were there pots on the table. Everything was put in a serving dish to be put on the table. And then guess what she did? Okay, so she would pour it in the bowl. She would hand it to one of us and send us on our way to put it on the table. And by the time we got back, she had already washed whatever pot or dish or whatever that it had been cooked in, and most likely was already drying it. So then as you walked up, she handed it to you. You put it away while she worked on the next one. Y'all, it was a sight to behold, I'm telling you. And she was this amazing caregiver and just loved making other people happy. You know, buying the perfect gift and watching you open it, you know, and her face would just light up when she had gotten you the gift you wanted, you know. Um, I found out later that she actually wanted to be a nurse and she gave that up to raise us. So I think just caring for people was somehow in her nature. But just the way she would do it was so interesting. Okay, for instance, I can remember her making brownies for breakfast, which, okay, maybe that seems a little odd, but then it kind of made perfect sense. I mean, why not a brownie, right? So, I mean, you see a lot of these, you know, cake style things that are they're breakfast foods, so why not? Anyway, I can remember that I would still be sleeping, you know, say a Saturday morning, because we had worked the night before, and often it was somewhat late when you got done and got home. And she would come and have a saucer that had a freshly baked brownie on it, and she would put it under my nose to wake me up. And then she would say, "Wake up, Peanut. It's time for breakfast." And that was just, to me, one of the most amazing things in the world. And then there were the little touches that she went to, for instance, when I was sick, because when I was little, I couldn't swallow pills, y'all. I would literally gag. It was just, I just couldn't do it. But, you know, back then, you didn't really have, I guess, some of the same children's options that you do now. So she would take, you know, the aspirin or the Tylenol, whatever it was, and she would dissolve that pill in a spoon, you know, like a teaspoon, but she'd put orange juice in it so that it didn't taste quite so bad. If you do it with just water, it's still gross. But she would do it in orange juice. And I mean, okay, Pinterest and places now, I don't know, that stuff is, those ideas, I guess, are a little bit easier to find. But back then, you know, who thought of that? Someone showed her that. Someone had to have treated her that way. My grandma, perhaps? Yeah, maybe so. Then there was the time that we lived back on our farm, and I was running down the sidewalk. I can't remember why, and I tripped and hit my head on the sidewalk. So I ended up with a concussion. And of course, she was kind of a little Miss Perfect, you know, and she was none too happy with me when I basically threw up all over the place at the door of the ER, because I think she was a little bit embarrassed that, you know, because I was gross. But that really quickly turned to concern when she put together kind of what that meant, that this was probably pretty serious if I was throwing up after a head injury. So then, you know, we go in, we see the doctor, and they tell me that I can't sleep for 24 hours because of this concussion. Like, you've got to keep her awake. And I'm like, I don't know, 6, I think. Y'all, she stayed up with me all night to make sure I stayed awake. She kept me entertained. You know, she kind of helped me keep my nauseous stomach at bay. And she really did her best to make it fun, you know, to make it not seem like this thing we had to do, you know. And then there was the work side. Y'all, she worked so hard. I don't think I've ever seen someone that works that hard. And she was doing the work of multiple people most of the time, and not always glamorous work, mind you. You know, most of what I remember was our seafood market and then our restaurant. Those are the ones that I remember the best. So we're talking about prepping food, and sometimes that was not a pleasant experience. I know when I grew up and I started helping, there were some things I stopped eating for a while after I had to prep it. I was like, okay, I'm good. But she did that every day. We had, the big fryers because it was seafood. A lot of it was deep fried, and you had to change the oil in those fryers. I don't know if anyone's ever done that. This is not an easy job. It's not really a clean job either. And she did that day in and day out. She just did it. No hesitation, no bitching. It was just what we had to do. Now, I can remember as a family, we did okay financially. There were ebbs and flows. I can remember times, sometimes were better than others. But we generally always had a nice house, decent cars. We generally had what we needed, some fair amount of what we wanted. Now, look, it's not like we lived in mansions or anything like that. Okay, these were very normal, the kind of middle class homes, and the cars and clothes and things were not fancy by any stretch, not designer and clothes and things like that. I guess we were fairly middle class. And my mom had always learned how to stretch a dollar because of those ebbs and flows. And I can remember a time, we lived in Arkansas at the time. I can't remember how old I was, maybe 10. And we went through a bankruptcy. Now, of course, to hear my parents tell the story, my dad's business partner evidently just one day up and left and took the money with him. So we were starting over, and they had figured out what we were going to do next, different business, and they were kind of in the process of making all that happen. But in the meantime, we really just didn't have any money. So mom would do things like sew our clothes. We didn't go buy new clothes. We would sew our clothes. And she knew how to make some hand-me-downs last, let me tell you. But she just had this way of finding solutions and kind of making things a game for us kids so that we didn't worry, make it a fun project. Let's see how we could sew patches on old jeans that would make them fun and stylish. So suddenly they didn't seem like old worn out jeans. They were just fashionable and unique. And she just had this amazing knack for doing that. I remember another night, our heat got turned off, I think, because I feel like we had power, but we had no heat. So I'm guessing maybe that was gas got turned off. And my dad was actually away. He used to come to South Louisiana to pick up seafood for our business, and he had to go make a run. So it was just us girls, and it was freezing that night. Literally, it was getting down into freezing. So mom got these like sleeping bags and quilts and whatnot, and the three of us all slept together. Now I know that was for us to stay warm and kind of stay safe, but she made it like a camp out. She made it like we were having fun. We were all going to camp out and be together that night. And so as a kid, even though I could see the worry on her face, and even then I guess I was picking up on emotions and things, and obviously I didn't know what I was doing at that point, but she made it where it wasn't as big a deal. The thing I remember about that night was mom making everything okay and us having fun, being, the three girls, having our little camp out. Then there was the cancer diagnosis, at least the first one. And I remember her, she just met it head on. And the truth is, I think she was more worried about being in the hospital and not being able to help with the business and help take care of us and that kind of stuff more than anything else. At least that's the way it seemed at the time. And I mean, in my mind, she was so invincible that I'm not sure it ever dawned on me that she wouldn't beat it. But that's another story. But you know what the really crazy thing was? She just, to me, I don't know, she seems so innocent for some reason. Maybe it was just the way she treated people and her outlook on life, and just kind of the life we led, very much a devout Christian, and things like that she just, I don't know, she just felt innocent to me. And of course, as I got older and moved away to college and things, I remember y'all, I would keep things from her. Now, mind you, it was nothing bad. Okay. It was pretty typical kind of stupid teenage stuff, young adult things, staying out too late and a bit of drinking and things like that. I really didn't get into a whole lot, to be honest with you. But I wasn't so worried about her being mad at me. That's what's crazy about it. I felt like I was shielding her. Like mom was this sweet angel who didn't know of such things. So I didn't want her to know. Okay, insert the eye roll here because, right. Yeah, she didn't know that stuff. Sure. But of course, there were moments, and again, as I got older, I started to see them more. The times when one day we were just sitting out on the back patio and she was just rocking in her little rocking chair that we had out there. And she was just kind of watching the sunset and just staring off in the distance. And I knew she must be thinking about something, So I'm like, Mom, what you thinking about? And the truth is I think she sort of let her guard down in that moment. And she started talking about her dad. She would talk about him some, but it was always really positive, of course. But she didn't talk about him a whole lot. Basically, she didn't get too in depth about it. It was very just little stories here and there. And of course, later, I figured out that it was just too painful for her to talk about. That's something we'll get into another day as well. But some days, you just kind of saw that mix of pain and love in her eyes for a few moments. And, of course, I get that feeling now. But then it was me having that rare moment of seeing the real person, the real things that were going on. There was also the time, again, I was pretty young, that I noticed her ankle was purple. Like, y'all, it was like super purple and bruised, purple, green, all the lovely bruised colors. And I was like, Mom, what's going on with your ankle? And she just brushed me off. And she said, oh, I stepped crooked out of the truck the other day and twisted it when we were moving. We had moved a couple days ago, 2 or 3 days ago or whatever. And I think I asked her something to the effect, well, Mom, go to the doctor. And as usual, she blew me off, and there was usually something said about money. We didn't have the money for that. There was no need for that. And what I know now is that it was probably broken and that she just basically just walked around on it forever. But money was always this kind of issue, and we didn't have insurance or anything like that. We owned our own business. They didn't have insurance. So she would just do without. I can also remember the night I could hear her and my dad screaming at each other again. Oh gosh. It wasn't an everyday occurrence. It wasn't that bad, but it wasn't rare either that they, would kind of get into it and be fussing with each other. But there was something about it. And again, didn't know that I was picking up on things. But there was just something in me that knew this was it. She was about to leave, and I freaked out. I couldn't imagine her leaving. I was like, wait, what is happening? And so I kind of started to cry in my room because I knew she would come to me. I knew she would. And that basically kept her from leaving that night. It settled the situation a little bit. It calmed things down a little bit. But to this day, I can't help but feel a little bit of guilt for that. I just wonder how different things would have been if she had left. Anyway, different story there too. Y'all, there are so many stories, and I want to tell you all of them, and I will. I want to get into more detail on individual ones. But for now, the gist of this is, as I got older, I started seeing the cracks. And as I was becoming an adult, I finally saw her as human. I realized I was comparing myself to some superhuman that I had created in my mind that just didn't exist. And as I've gotten into healing, I see it as so much more. And I won't lie, as some of those realizations came, as I started figuring some of the things out that had happened and what they really meant. Yeah, there was some anger that came with that too. But for the most part, I was starting to just basically understand her and know she was just being a human. And again, with the healing work I do now, her challenges are just so evident to me now. And, just like the rest of us, she's had a lot of healing to do. There are also some other things that I've found out that indicate that she made choices that kept me in the dark about the gifts I have. Not to mention a few other life-changing things that we all found out after she had passed. And let me tell you something, it's not fun being mad at someone that you can't yell at anymore. Okay? That's a thing. So with age came, I'm going to call it a perspective change. But none of that has changed how much I miss her, how much I still love her with every part of me, every fiber in me, how much I would love to have her ear to bend again, to ask for advice, to have those days where you laugh so much your stomach hurts. And I'm so grateful for her. And I truly know that she was always doing what she thought was best for me and for my sister and for my brother. But this getting older thing kind of put me in a place where I started to just unpack a lot, right? About her, about me, about my family, about life, about lots of things. And we're going to talk about at least a couple of those. So come see me in the next episode and let's get into what some of this taught me. Thanks so much for joining us today. We hope you enjoyed today's episode and that it has helped you move forward in your journey in some way. Make sure and like and rate and subscribe and, do all those things for our podcast because it really helps us out. Links and other important things you need to know will be in the show notes. And if you have ideas of topics you'd like to hear about or questions you want us to answer, you can drop those on the Soulful Wonderings page on either Facebook or Instagram, or you can drop us an email. Again, check the show notes for all that. If you're interested in theta healing or reading or just more spiritual topics, head over to our website, soulfulwonderings.com. In the meantime, take care of yourself and each other. Until next time.